Hello and welcome to what is the first of 12, I hope, Stacey West monthly shows. We are going to be talking every month about the past few game weeks, about the upcoming few game weeks, and talking all things tactics. So, seeing as we're talking all things tactics, it's only one person who had to be invited onto the monthly show, and that is Chris.
Hello.
And of course, we are also joined by Gary. How are we both doing?
Very well, thank you, Charlie. How are you, mate?
Yeah, we're all good. Looking forward to Saturday. Bolton away. It can't come soon enough, quite frankly. I don't know what you guys feel.
I'm good as well. Thanks for asking. But yeah,
I asked it to everybody. That's not me. No,
looking forward to the season starting. Not going to Bolton. £27 or whatever is quite a lot of money, but really interested to see this Lincoln City side. It's the most optimistic I've felt in a pre-season probably since certainly since Danny and Nicky, without a doubt, and probably more so since we've been in the third tier.
Yeah, I agree with you. Couldn't agree more. To be honest, it's a really exciting pre-season. I think we'll get onto it, but the last couple of games, if you are looking at results only, that might put a little dampener on that. For me, it hasn't at all. I'm really looking forward to the season starting. It's going to be a tough start against Bolton, but probably the best time of the season to play what could arguably be the toughest away game of the season is the first one in the season. Get it out and over and done with.
Well, that's a good little opportunity to segue straight into our first section of the monthly show. So, as I've said, we're going to have a look at the results of the previous month. So, obviously, this season, this month we will be looking at the pre-season results. We'll start with the typical warnings of it's pre-season. The results really don't matter. We are simply talking about the performances. I don't know about you guys. I ended up going to 2 pre-season friendlies. Obviously, we were all at Boston together, and I was also at Rotherham. I'm assuming that you both only did Boston.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll really go into that game. Obviously, if people have heard the podcast a couple of weeks ago, we did a bit of a deep dive into the Boston game then. But what kind of things really stuck out for yourself, Gary?
Well, first of all, I did watch the Rotherham game as well, or I've watched portions of it back. What stuck out for me, I think, in terms of tactics was the reliance on the wing backs, and I expected that from last season. And the beginning of last season, we didn't have that. We were playing a flat back four, and by reliance, I don't mean like a dependence. I mean a lot of our positive attacking play was coming through them and then looking for the big switch. We saw that switch kind of left to right towards the end of the season. I think away at Plymouth, it was Sorensen to Mandrew, teeing up Shadipo for the goal. Boston, non-league, I get it, weaker opposition, but we were still trying that. And I think that was really stood out. And the other thing for me was Alistair Smith's role, because I think we know what Ethan O'Rathen does. We've seen him do it. Could Smith drop in and do the same things that Matty Virtue did, but better, because that's what we need from him. And against Boston, I was convinced. Against Rotherham, a higher level of opposition, it's hard to say, to be honest. But they were the 2 things that really stuck out for me.
I'll agree with the wing back situation. I think that's a real key difference. We're playing the same system, but we're playing a very different playing that same formation in a very more kind of front foot style, and that comes from those wing backs having the opportunity to play higher up the pitch. And I think that was epitomised in the Boston game when Sorensen assisted Brown. So it was wing back to wing back, which of course I enjoyed quite a lot. I made a big deal out of that for the next 10 minutes when the goal went in. But that just kind of epitomised the mentality, I think, and that front foot mentality. And if they are 2 effectively wingers, really, that's how they play when we're in possession of the ball. That then allows those additional 3 players, the 2 10s/wingers, to tuck inside and play in and around Ben House and get closer to him. And it then allows us to attack with the front 5. And that's either a man for man against the back 3, or it's an overload against the back 4. And I can see those little triangles between wing back, holding midfielder and an attacking midfielder on each side to be really kind of key little patterns for us. And I think that's been a regular occurrence and a real kind of pattern that stood out to me in pre-season, because I'm like you guys, I only went to one game, but I've seen a few of them back and bits and bobs. So yeah, of course you can't read too much into it. And I think one thing that's worth bearing in mind about pre-season is that the standard of opposition has gradually increased as the games have ticked by, and the results have arguably, maybe kind of coincided with that a little bit. But what we've done well in every game, even in the games where we haven't got the favourable results. Those patterns have still been present. So yeah, that's what's exciting me the most, is the wing back situation.
Could I just pick up on the wing back to wing back? I don't want to rain on your parade, but first of all, that goal I think was predominantly created by Rico Hackett. Because if you remember, I think he held the ball up little turn and fed in Sorensen, and also we missed it in real time, but it was actually wing back through Ben House to wing back. I think House gets a touch. It wasn't Sorensen straight to Brown. So I'm sorry to do that to you.
Chris is now sat there crying.
Yeah, I am. The point still stands, even though it wasn't a direct assist. But yeah, it was that Hackett in that half space between the fullback and centre half that then created the width for Sorensen to go and exploit. Ball in the box. Whether it got a touch off Ben House or not, I'll take your words for it. And then the wing back on the other side could around the back post to finish it off.
It actually proves your argument. It actually proves your argument about triangles, because actually it's Hackett and House involved as well in a 3-move before a tap in from Brown. So
thanks.
I mean, I'll pick up on the triangles, because that's something that I very much looked at myself and realised where we were stood, obviously, for Boston being sort of just past the halfway line. There was a lot of kind of interplay between, as Chris mentioned, the holding midfielder and then Lasse Sorensen, who was on our side for the first half, where we saw it a lot more predominantly. And then was it Rico Hackett that was on our side? It was, wasn't it?
Yeah, with Sorensen.
Yes, yeah. So those little passages of play were brilliant. Obviously, Gary, you've already mentioned the hold-up play from Rico in one situation that then fed Lasse Sorensen through. Those kind of situations are going to be something where that we're going to hopefully see a lot of this season. And those two holding midfielders are going to have a lot of work on their hands, because they're going to have to be able to kind of defend in the gaps that somebody like Lasse Sorensen or Jaden Brown on the other side, for example, are going to leave. But they're also going to obviously have to push forward and be part of that triangle. So they're going to have to run a lot. And I think, Ethan Erraham, we already know we don't need to be worried about having him in that midfield. Alistair Smith, I think, showed the same kind of situation, that we don't need to be worried about if it is him, or it may be another centre mid such as Ted Bishop. But we'll kind of move on to who we think it might be in a little bit. But as far as I'm concerned, there was so much kind of optimism, as has already been said. There's so much to look forward to with this team going into the new season. Just hopefully we can make sure we put it all together on a match-by-match basis.
Yeah, just to kind of expand on that a little bit, because you mentioned that the holding midfielders having a key role, and they absolutely will do. What I thought was really interesting is in our deep build-up is we weren't really building up through the wing-backs in a deep position. So let's imagine you're playing a back four and your right centre-back has got the ball in deep possession. Jensen's giving the ball to PJM, let's say. If you're playing a back four, your right back's going to be maybe 10, 15 yards further up and on the foot. What happens here in our back three with our really, really aggressive wing backs, as soon as the ball got passed against Boston, it was to PJM in the right centre-back role in the three. Lasse Sorensen was on his bike. He used that TJ having the ball on his trigger, not to go and get the ball to feet, but to get on his bike at the wing, get high up the pitch, and then TJ's outball was into either Smith or Erraham. And then the triangle was from Smith or Erraham being the deepest of that three, and then of course the 10 and the wing back kind of really high up the pitch as well. And I thought that's a bit of a difference from last season. I think last season that pass was into the wing back was in a deeper starting point. Let's imagine Sean Rowan, for example, last season when he was playing left wing back. I think he would receive the ball to feet in a far deeper position when the left side centre back had the ball. Whereas now it appears that there's a trigger of as soon as that ball is passed to an outside centre half, the wing backs get on the pitch and join the attack.
Yeah, I would very much agree. You know, there's the clear tactical knowledge within the team. They all know the role that they need to be playing. And obviously it's just making sure that continues throughout the whole season. Right, so seeing as we've already mentioned a little bit about tactics, let's go into a bit more of a full tactical review. So, as we said, we're now going to have a look at a full tactical review of, obviously, the pre-season games, but what we expect to be lining up as come Bolton on Saturday. So, as you can see on the screen, this is I don't know, what are we calling it, guys? Are we calling it a 3-4-3? We're calling it a 5-2-3?
I think it plays more of a 3-4-3 this season.
I would very much agree. We've already spoken about the fact that the wing backs really have the license to move forward. And what's also really interesting to pick out, something that we've spoken about before, that we've really noticed in these preseason games, is the two wide players, if that's what you'd want to call them, the 7 and 11 on the screen. They're really tucked in. They're wide number 10s. How does that kind of, there you go, the one that's currently being sort of shuffled around. How does that kind of affect the 3-4-3 that we're playing, do you think, Chris?
I think it allows the wing-backs to get higher. And you're always looking for overloads. That's kind of what we're looking to try and do. You either want to get into a 1v1 situation or an ideal situation, a 1v0 situation. So let's imagine you're playing against a back four and you progress the ball up the pitch. If these two 10s are tucking in nice and high, the wing-backs are pushing on, then you're effectively attacking with a front five. And that's a really good way of trying to break down a back four. If you have superior individuals, it's a good way against playing against the back five as well. We'll get on to later why maybe the 3-5-2 or a particular version of a 3-5-2 might be something that Mark Kennedy might look towards later in the season or at times in the season. But in terms of that attacking versus defending, we've got a front five there that's going to really spread a defensive 5 or 4 down. And hopefully it's going to allow us to create more chances. Last season, this often looked a lot more... Oh, God, that's not very good, is it? A lot more kind of like this at times. And with the striker isolated and our wingers more like wingers, even in possession. And I could just see us just playing a bit tighter. I think that'll show us having a bit more of the ball as well. And I think if we progress the ball better and we just have more possession, it allows us to build through the thirds to allow those wing backs and those 10s to get into those positions. If it's a really transitional game, you can never get into that settled shape. But I think it allows us to attack with more potency, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I very much agree. It also, something that I can very much notice, it really allows us to have more of a box midfield as well. So,
absolutely. Which is very fashionable these days.
It certainly is. Most top-level managers are using it. So it obviously allows us to really try and dominate that midfield game. And obviously, really, we've spoken about overlaps already. And really try to overlap it in different areas of the pitch and try to be really fluid. One thing I also kind of notice is when we are, let's say, in possession, attacking with that front five, if you then have somebody like Ben House sitting slightly higher, this formation here might start to look quite similar to what people may have seen a lot this season. This is something that Pep Guardiola has moved into with the Man City's team.
This is their start. This is how they start. Their wingers really are just out-and-out wingers that are really, really high. But yeah, formations are always fluid. So, I don't like always saying, right, this person is definitely playing, in a 3-5-2 or a 3-4. It's all situational, but it's certain shapes and certain patterns and certain roles, isn't it? And you'll often find most teams will either defend with a rest defense. So that's the guys that are staying back with either a 2 and a 2, a 2 and a 3, or a 3 and a 2. And it's that front five, which is often the difference. And then what Pep does, because they've got ridiculously good ball players, is often John Stones, one of those 2 6s, goes and gets forward and gets involved and creates a front 6 and causes havoc. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That's definitely how Man City generally play in possession.
You see, I find that quite interesting because what we're looking at there is you've pulled Mandrew and, let's say, Hackett almost centrally, which I don't expect to see as much. So I think that we're still going to see that. Now, I'm a pessimist, so the first thing I look at there is it's great, it's attacking. You guys, you're talking about Pep, you're talking about Man City. This is Lincoln City, and we're in League One, and we're going to be coming up against Derby and Bolton and Charlton and Peterborough and Portsmouth, who are going to look to overload us. So it's how this formation reacts in that situation. that fascinates me a little bit more. It's all well and good talking about attacking. We ain't going to go out and attack like we did at Boston every single week. And at that point, you are going to be looking at something more akin to a flat back five, I think, with hoping possibly then to even set these. Obviously, you'd be a lot deeper, looking for, like against Plymouth with the quick breakaway goal. The key for me then is not this guy. This is Arahan. Arahan probably then sits there prowling almost in front. So you've got a flat back five. The key for me is this boy then. At that point, it's Alistair Smith. And I think last season we saw it with Matty Virtue. We didn't see it with Max Sanders. This position, and I've been going on about him all summer, is absolutely vital when we are under the cosh, because he has got to be able to transition quickly. We know Ben House will be coming back to help out defending. That's what he does. Tom Hopper did it before him. That element of our game is not going to change. It's all about this guy for me. And if you're under the cosh and you've got a player there who can transition quickly, who can play accurate balls, and we saw sniffs of it against Boston, by the way, one or two little counter attacks where he's picked it up, he's threaded a ball through. Potentially, let's take Ben House out. Potentially, Ben House is back. He's been defending. It's these two then. That's when they become the proper runners. We're talking about these guys being the runners when we're looking to go five and overload and all that sort of thing. When we're on a counter attack, we saw it with Shadipo, we saw it with Mandrew. It's these. They're going to be coming in here and here. They're going to be looking to get into their one-on-ones, or they're going to be looking to get wide, and then the other sneaking at the back post. It's all about what ball this boy plays for me.
There's a couple of examples of that on Saturday against Rotherham as well, which we did it really well, and it was those that were runners in behind.
It won't always be Smith, but you would imagine Arahan to be doing the defensive duties, and I know that this is going to play Chris up because I've now got the number 9 back in defence.
The thing is, though, like the numbers don't matter too much in this system because it's impossible to have them all in the right place, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'll let you off.
But that's how I see it. It interests me because, let's face it, we're going to go out against Bolton on Saturday, and we ain't going to be the ones that, we're going to want to try and be on the front foot, but there's going to be portions of the game where we're not. We're going to be under the cosh. We did really well last year, soaking up pressure in those games. And okay, we won 1 or 2, Ipswich, Barnsley. But did we win them with having a lot of chances? No, we had to be clinical. We had to outperform our XG. You're not going to outperform your XG season after season after season. You're going to need to see more of Bristol City in the Cup and less of the under the cosh games that we saw at Barnsley, Ipswich, etc. I think that's how we become more of a success with this formation.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't see us playing how me and Charlie were just discussing against those bigger sides. I think we'll probably see some very similar performances against those bigger teams. I think we can all of us agreed that there's a definite top 3 in the league. It's Portsmouth, it's Bolton, it's Derby. They're the big games where I think, it's a point to great result, and we play hard to beat. We know we've got a blueprint to play against that. What we really struggled with last season was breaking down those teams that did play behind the ball. The amount of times that we couldn't beat the teams that on paper we, inverted commas, should be beating. And I feel that just this more aggressive nature of how this system works definitely plays into that. And also the tactical flexibility within the squad now to play a 3-5-2, which Mark Kennedy made a couple of points on his post-match interview against Rotherham yesterday. And I think that's really interesting. I think it's really interesting. So 3-5-2 can work in 2 ways. Thank you, whoever's doing this for me. So this, how you got here, this 3-5-2 with kind of 1-6 and 2-3-8s. This is how you play against the back 3 if you're the better team and you want to score a goal, basically, because you can then attack with the front 6, 2 wing backs, 2 8s, and 2 strikers. Obviously, it's not always going to be in a line, but then you're then creating that 1v0 against the back 5. That's very, very difficult to do in the system that we currently play. I can't ever see us starting like this in a game and playing it in a really aggressive way. I can see us playing this way maybe to try and shore a game up if we've gone really deep. But I think it's an interesting change because that on the screen, that 11 and 7, so those 2 kind of central midfielders, 8s, I can see these being really aggressive 8s and kind of almost playing almost as 10s at times when we've got the ball. If we're attacking, this is like our 1-0 down, 15 minutes to go formation, in my opinion. And then if you used to slide that number 8 forward into the 10 role and bring the other 2 deeper, so we've kind of got 2 6s and 1 10. I think if we was to start in a 3-5-2, it's this sort of shape that we play. You play House, you play Walker, and you play Mandrew in that 10 role. Yeah. And then you've actually got just as solid kind of rest defense. You've got the same back 5 if you would do in our original shape. Well, plus the wing backs being the same. It's just a slight switch in that shape where your two strikers are closer together. I think it's horses for courses.
To play that, we need to sign another central midfielder, in my opinion, because if you were starting with two holding sixes, at the minute, Lass covers as a third central midfielder. Okay, perhaps Ted Bishop, maybe. We've already gone through pre-season and Ted's missed the start of it and now he's missed the end of it as well. For me, you can't rely on that. If you're going to look at this formation, to be honest, I think another central midfielder is probably
and another striker.
Anyway.
If we're going to play this as our starting system, we need another striker. I can't see this being our
no, we won't sign another striker.
But I feel like this is a very definite plan B. And this is basically what this allows us to do is get Tyler Walker and Ben House playing together in the same system if we need that at any time in a game. I think we've all agreed that we're going to play 3-4-3. I think it's pretty obvious we're going to play 3-4-3 as plan A.
May I pose a question?
Go for it.
Tyler Walker and Ben House both score 5 goals apiece in the first 10 games. Does Mark Kennedy force this to get them both in the team?
It depends on how those goals have come about.
If they've scored it in the last 10 minutes of games whilst we've gone to this system and they've been on the pitch together, then sure. But if they've each scored it 5 goals when they've each started in a 3-4-3, then
how do you keep them both happy? How do you keep the fans happy if Tyler Walker's got 5 goals and you're leaving him on the bench every week? The first game, Ben House doesn't score.
Hey, this is best case scenario. I think that's a good situation to be in. It's a good problem to have. I'm with you, Charlie. I think the answer is it depends, to be honest. And again, it's a little bit horses for courses because whether you play that or the 3-4-3, it's a little bit about personnel. It's a little bit about how you disrupt an opposition's build-up because the only way you can press is if you're playing against a team that does build up. If you're playing against a team that just plays it long all the time, you can't really press. So I think that organisation and that shape in that front three will maybe be a little bit dictated by how the opposition likes to try and progress the ball from deep as well. But it's nice to have that tactical flexibility in the squad. We just didn't have it last season.
So one thing, obviously, we've spoken about the proper kind of attacking system of 5 players going to push on against a team that, to use the words that aren't really true, but we should be beating. Last season at home to Morecambe, it was the last game we won up until Accrington away in February. So we'd won that in November. And one thing that really stuck out to me and a lot of others was how we played the same game that we would have done against a Charlton, a Sheffield Wednesday, a Bolton. We sat back and we let Morecambe have the ball because then they weren't used to having the ball. And quite frankly, they got scared by having the ball so much that they didn't know what to do and they ran out of ideas. If we're trying to go much more attacking, let's say we're trying to do what Bolton would want to do against other people, what Sheffield Wednesday would have wanted to do last season against people, but we don't actually have the personnel to quite pull that off at every occasion. Are we maybe being a little bit naive in these sort of tactical systems that we're thinking up and actually we're trying to overcomplicate something that should be a lot simpler? I'm not saying that's my belief, but I'm just posing the question.
Well, look, you're definitely going to get people that are either watching this now or turned off 5 minutes ago going, I can't be doing with all of that. Because football, you can present it as overcomplicated when actually it isn't. These are fundamentals, they're basics. Every single team does them. But people go, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in getting the wingers forward. I'm interested in this or that. But to go back to your point about Morecambe, actually, I have to disagree a little bit because I didn't think Morecambe looked particularly lost in that game. I don't think they were a great side, but I thought that if anything, we looked a little bit lost in that game because we were letting Morecambe have the ball. Yeah. I don't think that was our intentional tactic. I think that was just Mark Kennedy at that time was still finding his way in. So we did approach every single game the same way. And it was evident against the likes of Charlton around that time, if I remember correctly, was absolutely woeful. I think what we're looking to do now with the personnel that we've got and the way that we've approached some of the games in pre-season is we're trying to find the blueprint for teams that want to have the ball, for teams, that don't want to have the ball, so that we can now go to them. And this has been a problem that we've had for a couple of seasons. It was under Michael Appleton in his second full season. It was under Mark Kennedy last season, when unable to break teams down. And that's been the problem. That's why we're talking now about tactics and tucking in these wingers and attackings in 5s or 6s. But we weren't able to do that. And then all of a sudden, at the end of last season, we looked like we were trying to do it. So I think actually it's going to be quite a fresh new feel, even though it looks very similar. We're talking about the same numbers. We're talking about the similar sorts of players in the similar setups. I just think that actually in terms of purpose, we're going to be doing different things with the same setup, if that makes sense. You know, somebody might be watching this after Bolton. We might have done exactly the same thing. It'd be 10, 12, 15 games in. People will go, actually, we are able to take games to Carlisle and to Northampton and to Cheltenham now.
Yeah, it's those type of games I think we'll see a difference this season compared to last season. I can't see us playing much differently against those bigger sides, as we said. But something to look forward to. I could talk about this all day. Maybe we should move on.
Yeah, I think so.
Probably for the best then, Chris. So what we're going to have a little look at now is the best 11s. Start off with my best 11. It's going to be on the screen now. So just to talk you through it, obviously, Lucas Jensen in goal. We've got Pordy O'Connor and Adam Jackson and Sean Rowan as the 3 centre-halves. I have got Pordy O'Connor as the right centre-half with Jacko in the middle. That might not necessarily be the case. That could either way around for me. Lass Sorensen being the right wing-back with Jaden Brown being the left wing-back. Ethan Erahan and Alistair Smith is the 2 central midfielders with Enrico Hackett, Ben House and Danny Mandroyo as the front 3. I'll kind of open it up to the 2 of you then. Obviously, we'll look at your best 11s in a second, but what are your immediate thoughts on my one?
Well, I think what's really interesting is because we shared this earlier with each other, didn't we, about what we were going to say. And
you say that, you've seen mine, I haven't seen yours.
Yeah, well, yeah, true. And you've got Hackett on the left and Mandroyo on the right.
Yes.
So I've got one personnel that's different. Everyone else is the same, but how they are structured in the side is slightly different. Mm-hmm. So shall I share mine and Gary shares his, and then we can have a little discussion around it, maybe.
You share yours then, Chris. We'll get
so I've also gone for Jensen in goal, left centre back of Rowan, central centre back of Pordy O'Connor, and then TJ Ioma, right centre back with was that yours as well? With wing backs pretty obvious, I think, in Sorensen and Brown. Erahan and Smith is the 2 6s. Mandroyo on the left of the 2, and Hackett on the right of the 2 with House up top. Reason for that is when they're cutting inside on their natural foot, that just creates that natural space for the wing backs to push on. I feel like it's probably hard. I don't think that's how we will line up against Bolton. I think Adam Jackson will play over TJ Ioma, but I think my preferred 11 involves in that right centre half role. I think TJ is my starting centre back there, just because I think he's a lovely little hybrid between a fullback and a centre back, and it just suits that 3 really well. Whereas if you play either Powdy or Jacko there, they're both excellent defenders, and it's really harsh to kind of miss Jackson out. But you're playing a traditional kind of head it, kick it style centre half, a kind of that battler there, and you maybe just lose that little bit of that kind of hybrid nature. He's not going to be as adventurous as TJ is, and maybe not going to be able to see the pass quite as well as TJ will. See, TJ's I wouldn't say he's got fantastic kind of long passing range, but I think his choice of pass over 10 yards is pretty impressive. His decision making on those are outstanding. So yeah, that's mine.
Shall I do mine?
Yep.
Shall I do mine? Now, actually, there is a slight change because my preferred starting 11 through the season is exactly as Chris has just said. And I'd said this on a dog walk. It's not me going, yeah, I like that. I said it on a dog walk a couple of weeks ago. TJ Ioma, right centre back for me, because when we want to play our game, when we want to impose our game of football on everybody else, you need that little bit, not to say better range of passing, because that's offensive to Adam Jackson, in the same way that I'm not going to negatively talk about TJ in a second. But for Bolton, my starting 11 is Lucas Jensen in goal. It's Lass and Jaden Brown at fullbacks. It's Sean Rowan. It's Pordy in the middle. And it's Adam Jackson on the right. I'll come to it why in a minute. It's Smith and Erahan. It's Mandroyo on the left. It's Ben House in the centre. It's Rico Hackett on the right. The reason that I think I would like to see Adam Jackson start against Bolton particularly is I think the slightly more uncomplicated defending is something that we're going to require in certain games this season. When you go to Derby, when you go to potentially Fleetwood, when you've got Jayden Stockley and Jack Marriott throwing yourselves around. I just think that Adam Jackson is a player who last season was putting his head and his body on the line more. And I think with TJ, he's going to be the sort of player that's going to be more involved in creating, more involved when we're on the front foot. Saturday is one of what I would say probably 6 or 7 games this season where we're absolutely not going to be. We want to be on the front foot in every home game, no matter who's playing. And with the away games, a large percentage of those you want to be. There are several that we're not going to be. And we've said Portsmouth, we've said Bolton, we've said Derby. Those games away, Adam Jackson was man of the match away at Ipswich last season when we won 1-0. Remember it, he headed everything away, he kicked everything away. Pawdy was outstanding. I think Saturday could be that type of game. So for me, although TJ is absolutely my first choice right-sided centre-back going forward, Adam Jackson is my shout on Saturday.
I agree for Saturday. I think over the next 4 or 5 games, I would like TJ to get his chance there and make the position his own. But I couldn't agree more in terms of, again, in that certain starter game against a certain opposition, you need to keep it uncomplicated. And Adam Jackson perfect at that. Yeah. So, I agree. Even though we disagree, we kind of do agree.
But Pawdy in the centre, just to come on to what the Charlie's one, for me, Pawdy's the captain. Yeah. He's the spine. He's got to play in the centre, in my opinion. And he'll then be a constant. He'll be a constant for the players around him. You know where he's going to be. I want 46 games out of him if we can get it. We got 45, I think, last season, didn't we? Did we have 1 suspension for bookings? There was no injuries. We want 45, 46 games for him in the middle, Arahan in front of him, Ben House in front of him. There's your spine, and that's how you win games. Consistency.
You want your best players in their best positions. Yeah. His best position is central centre-back. He can play on the right or the left. He did it at various times last season. But he's best in the centre. So play him there. He's a captain. Do that. I agree.
So just to throw in a slightly more complicated question then, if Lewis Montsma was fit, would he be taking any of those centre-half positions?
If he was fully fit and at his peak, he plays in the right centre-half role.
Yeah. I would very much agree with that. The reason I omitted TJ, again, I do think that TJ is going to have, I don't want to say a redemption arc because that's really unfair on him. He wasn't bad. He wasn't bad last season. Not really. He had a couple of games, but I do think he's going to thrive in the system. As we've said, I just haven't seen enough quite yet. We've only seen pre-season, I know, but I just thought Adam Jackson at the minute is still slightly above. But I also expect my opinion on that lineup to change come the 1st of September when we do this again.
You know what's interesting? Yeah. You know what's interesting though is that, and I know we haven't done this before, but if we was to cast our minds back a year, 2 years, 3 years, if we was to have this conversation 1 week before the first game of the season, do you think we'd agree on 10 of the 11 starters? I don't think that could ever. I think I've changed my own mind more than that over the last 2 or 3 years about the whole squad that we had available.
It's not just that we couldn't agree on it. It's that there wouldn't be any clarity for anybody because at this stage in the last 2, 3, 4 seasons, potentially not the COVID season, but certainly the last 2 or 3 seasons, we haven't had anything like a complete squad going into the first game. Last season, Chris Maguire and Hakeem Adelakan both played on the opening day. Tom Hopper played up front. It's the most complete we've been going into a season, and that's why we can make 100%. An agreement.
Yeah, true. And I think that's probably has a big part to play in our kind of optimism going into this early part of the season as well, because we feel ready probably for the first time in the last few as well.
I would just like to give a little honourable mention. There was one player, as well as sort of Jacko and TJ, that kind of debate. There was one player who I would have not put in if I hadn't seen him perform well during pre-season, which obviously he has. But I would have put in Dylan Duffy over Rico Hackett on paper. But Rico Hackett has really tried to make that position his own during pre-season. And
I'd be really impressed with him pre-season.
Really he's impressed. Quite clearly going to be the starter. So hence why he's put in. But Dylan Duffy definitely should get that kind of first sub honourable mention.
In one of those 2 roles behind Ben House, Dylan Duffy's the first player that comes on. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so the final section that we'll look at, seeing as this is a monthly preview and review show, is, of course, the upcoming fixtures. Okay, so having a look through the fixtures, you'll be able to see them on screen. We have got 5 league games, 1 cup game, with obviously the potentiality of another cup game slightly later in the month if we can get past Notts County. First of all, then, if we're just picking up on that, Notts County Carabao Cup, thoughts on our chances against Notts County?
I think it's a good opportunity for an away day. It's a good opportunity for a big away following. I also actually think it's a good opportunity for Mark Kennedy to rotate his squad a little bit, ready for the first home league game of the season against Wickham the Saturday after. I don't think it's going to be like a second string, but I think you might see Dylan Duffy to get a start, Ted Bishop get a start if he's fit, for example. Tyler Walker potentially get a start if he's ready. He might not be at that point. I think those kind of rotation players in the squad get a game in the EFL Cup. We don't make a lot of money from the EFL Trophy. Those players are still capable of winning that game. I think you're missing an opportunity to get minutes into those legs if you don't do that on the Tuesday. So I think that's probably the most difficult one to predict in terms of result, because there's probably a few more question marks around their lineup.
Last season, bear in mind, in the EFL Cup, I seem to think Charlie Kendall started. He scored, didn't he? Really early on. I think it's a really challenging game, and I think of all the cup games that we've had, the League Cup games, I think that's the most challenging. I remember when we first came back in the league, we went away to Rotherham, I think, in that competition. Did we lose 2-1 Billy Knott score, or did we lose 1-0? Either way, I remember going away to Rotherham. It was Billy Knott was outstanding if it wasn't 2-1.
Was that the season that we played them in the league not long later?
They'd just come out of the Championship. They were League One, and we'd just come up out of the National League.
That's the season after them, wasn't it? Yeah, of course.
We were hungry. We were fired up, and we were hungry when we went for that game. These lot are going to be as well, Notts County. They're going to have been sick to death of playing Kings Lynn and Welling and Scunthorpe and other pointless non-league teams like that. They're going to want to play the big boys, and that's what we are. They think that they're a bigger club than us. Arguably, in terms of ground, in terms of history, in terms of all of that, they're going to have a massive point to prove. So I think that is really challenging. I agree. I think that we'll see some of the fringe players play. I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see a few more fringe players play than perhaps we're giving credit for. Ted Bishop to start if he's fit. If Adam Jackson started against Bolton, TJ definitely to start. I think almost certainly you're going to see Dylan Duffy. Wouldn't surprise me 100% if we don't see Jovan. Think it'll be too early for Tyler Walker.
Yeah, I very much agree. We will have some fringe players playing inevitably. And to be honest, I'm obviously not hoping for, I'm not saying I necessarily expect a loss, but I also really wouldn't be surprised if we go there and don't get a win and don't progress. But we all love a cup run. It was brilliant last season away down at Southampton in the 4th, 5th round, whatever it was. But I don't exactly think it's the end of the world, considering where ourselves and a lot of other people are predicting us to be this season, fighting for that kind of 6th place playoffs. That's what matters.
I think that the league definitely has a greater importance this season than it did last season. And also the EFL Trophy, not the EFL Trophy, sorry, the League Cup is the least important of the 3 cups in terms of income for the club.
100%.
So, you go risk averse, don't you?
That said, if I remember correctly, in the League Cup, you split the attendance, split the revenue.
It might be 40-40 and
45%.
And 10 goes to the league, doesn't it?
Yeah. Could not have wished for a better game then, could we?
Yeah, correct.
Because they're back in the league. I don't know if they're at home on the opening day of the season.
They are not. No.
So it's their first game back as a football league club, not in the football league. There's going to be 9,000
plus.
Yeah, there should be. If their fans are coming out, there should be. So it's better than us having to go away to Northampton or Bradford or somewhere like that with a handful. And like I say, I'm not a defeatist. I enjoyed the cup run last season, but if we have a cup run, personally, FA Cup is always the first choice. EFL Trophy is the second choice because of that. It's like we said, it's the third choice cup. Get that in now before we get beat, so that we can clip it up and go. We didn't actually care. Notts County. You've still got to play Barrow and Sutton. Don't get above your stations just yet.
But they could quite easily go straight through League Two, and they'll be here this time next year.
So could Wrexham and Stockport are going to be expected to be up there. And
that's my top three. That's my top three, and the playoff winners predictions for
League
Two.
Me as well.
I've not put Wrexham in mine in the top 3.
Gillingham.
Just trying to be. I actually have,
Gillingham are the others.
That's a smart shout.
I think Gillingham are going to do it because they've recruited. But anyway, that's for a,
Yeah,
that's
we're not
for a
talking about them.
different pod.
Actually.
So just looking, so taking a view now at the league games, we've got 5 league games. First off, kick it off. How many points are we getting out of those first 5? Or what's the minimum that you would be happy with? Chris?
6 to 9 is my prediction.
Fair enough.
Gary? The minimum I would be happy with is 7.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's winnable games in there. I think that we will get 9. 8 or 9.
I'll show this quickly. So I wrote 7 to 9 initially, and then I thought that's not good, so I crossed it out and put 6.
I've got to be honest.
So I'll say 7. Actually,
there's 2 there that I will be disappointed if we don't win. Which
Northampton away,
and actually Shrewsbury away.
Not sure about that.
Well, the thing is, like, because I was looking like best case, worst case, and then the average. Really, so best case scenario, I think is a point at Bolton. I think we might lose, but I think best case scenario is a point. I'd take it all day long. We'd rip someone's hand off if they offered us that now. Wickham at home will be a really interesting one for me because obviously we've all put forward our predictions, and I actually nominated Wickham as my surprise strugglers. And by that, I didn't mean that I think they're going to flirt with relegation, but I think there's definite top 3. We've mentioned that Portsmouth, Bolton, Derby, whatever order you can discuss. But I think we all agree they're the top 3 in the league. I think almost everybody that knows anything about League One has kind of predicted them as their top 3. And then below that, though, there's probably 8 or 9, arguably 10 clubs who have got a realistic shout in-house of thinking, yeah, we could push for the playoffs this season. I think Wickham are probably one of them. My opinion is they're probably there's that step below. The other clubs that I kind of would nominate in and around us for that kind of 5th or 6th spot potentially. And it's a good barometer playing them early in the season because they expect that of themselves. If we don't get over the line against them, if we struggle to break them down, because they're going to be hard to beat, they're going to be organised. We know how they play. Their blueprint hasn't changed massively under Bloomfield compared to Ainsworth. I think their squad's a year older. I think it's a tiny bit weaker. So I think it's a really interesting one. If we come away without the point, I think maybe I know you can't read too much into one game, but maybe my expectations might need a little bit of a rethink. And I think, you know what, maybe when we are just a mid-table team, if a good run could put us into the playoffs, but maybe not as serious about it. If we play Wickham and we win convincingly, yeah, I'm going to think, yeah, maybe we are part of that group of 8 to 10 clubs that could, if things go well, push for the playoffs. So for me, Wickham's a real key one. I then think Northampton is a game that we should win, even though it's away. I think that's a game that we should all go away and win. And then Shrewsbury's an interesting one. It was more probability that if we did beat Wickham and beat Northampton, it's unlikely you don't win 3 games in a row early in the season very often. So I kind of put that down as a draw just for that reason. I think we'll either draw against Wickham or beat Wickham. We'll beat Northampton, and then I put Shrewsbury as a draw or win. I don't think we'll win all 3. Which one we draw will probably dictate how we see the season going forward.
And Blackpool?
Point. I'd take a point.
See, I divide the league in my head. There are 3 sets of teams in this division.
Okay,
there are the top 3, Derby, Portsmouth, Bolton, miles away from everybody else. There is the next group who are, and I'm disappointing everybody now when I'm not putting us in this, who are Charlton, Blackpool, Wickham, Barnsley, Peterborough, that sort of team, I think, who going into this season will expect to be challenging for the top 6. Okay. Lincoln fans do not expect to be challenging. We believe, or some people believe we will be. They'll expect. For me then, from us down, and last season it was Shrewsbury and us down, much of a muchness, right the way down to the bottom. And okay, you might say, well, Cambridge, potentially Cheltenham, a little bit. But do you know what? Cambridge are only 3 signings and 3 victories in the first 5 from wedging themselves up there like Shrewsbury did last season. It's much of a muchness. So when I look at the fixtures, I see us getting 3 teams out of the way, 2 at home, 1 away, who are in the block of probably 8 or 9 teams at the top. So it's not the easiest August, but it also on paper doesn't look like a massively challenging one. And I don't mean that arrogantly, But last season you looked and you'd have, oh God, it's Peterborough, then it's Ipswich, then it's Sheffield Wednesday, then it's, Plymouth was suddenly doing well. The games seem to come thick and fast. I've looked, even, we're not doing it now, but I've looked through into September and I'm thinking, well, there's only been Portsmouth that I'm worried about until we get into mid-October. So I don't think we've got an easy start at Bolton, but I think that we've got the sorts of games where we've got to get to August and be wedged in 10th, because there are going to be harder games to come than Northampton away. Shrewsbury away, I think Shrewsbury at the moment are a little bit up in the air. Like, they've got the new manager in, they've got the new director of football, their squad's still a bit threadbare. I think it's a good time to be playing them, because I think they'll be better on the 2nd of September than they are on the 19th of August. I think that Wycombe will be probably better as well at that point. For me, the big one is actually the 26th of August. It's Blackpool at home, because I think I get Chris's point about Wycombe entirely, and it's almost like a similar point I'm going to make about Blackpool. Neil Critchley, good manager, got them promoted before. The one team that dropped out of the Championship that will have a legitimate reason to believe that they can go straight back up. They're not a basket case, but also they're not Sheffield Wednesday, they're not Ipswich. Arguably, they're not even Plymouth. If we can win that game, that's the statement. That's the statement of intent to take into September, to take into Bristol Rovers, Oxford and Carlisle on a 3-game run. I think by the time we get to that Blackpool game, and it's such a stupid thing to say, obviously, but we'll have a real clear indication of where we are. Last season, we didn't have that. We got to the Cambridge game, which was just at the end of August. We played a lot of games in August. We played Exeter, by the way, in July, if you remember. And we were no clearer about who we were, about our identity, about where we might finish. Here, we'll be 5 league games in. It's going to be September, and we're going to know almost everything I think about Lincoln City, and that game will be the benchmark for me.
I very much agree. For me, I put Blackpool as a team that will finish in the playoffs in my prediction. And I think they're the only one that are coming down that have a chance of being there, if I'm honest.
Yeah,
and I also don't expect them to be top 4. I think they'll be 5th or 6th. So the way I see it is, if we can beat Blackpool, very much agree with you guys, that is the statement of, okay, it isn't a cup final, it isn't a playoff final, but if we can beat them, that puts us, as far as I'm concerned, in that group and towards the upper echelons of that group, provided Blackpool obviously don't have a terrible start.
The crucial little thing there is the 15th and the 19th of August is those 2 away games in 4 days, because they are 2 on paper that you think are winnable. We don't know. Northampton might come up and be this season's kind of Exeter, who after their start last season, they did really well. So actually we're skipping those 2 games, but it's really, really crucial. And knowing Lincoln, actually we'll get 9 points, beat Bolton, beat Wycombe, beat Blackpool, and get done over by Northampton and Shrewsbury. The fact is, in League One, you never know. Right, you genuinely never know. We didn't lose a game to the 3 teams that went up to the Championship, and if you look at the teams that went down, we were struggling to pick up wins against them. So, it's probably good that we're not playing a Cambridge or a Cheltenham or a Stevenage or wherever else people think may or may not be down there. Northampton, I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether they will or they won't. I think it is the sort of start that any team in our position wants. A team that is more or less complete going into the season, and will sign players. I buy that. I get that. I understand that the team will look a little different come the 2nd of September in Bristol Rovers.
We have far less work to do compared to, I would say, the vast majority of our peers.
And we have improvement. We don't have necessary signings to make. I think that's the big difference.
But we've got several benchmarks. We haven't got like 3 of the promotion candidates back to back, and you're going, God, what? We've actually got Northampton coming up, expected to struggle. Shrewsbury, a team that we're expected to beat. Blackpool, a kind of we've got each little test that we need going through August, and I think it's a really good opportunity for us to see all of this tactical stuff that we've talked about throughout this show, which was meant to be half an hour and it's gone well over. All of that stuff, I think we'll see examples of it. And when we're sitting here in a month's time, we're going to have loads more. If you're watching this and you think 50 minutes is excessive, you wait till next month when we're trying to pick apart Northampton away from Tuesday.
Whoever's still watching now, thank you. I mean, hopefully you've enjoyed it. So this was just for you. If this is for you, great. And if you did turn off after halfway through my first answer, then they're not watching now, so you won't even see my apology, will you?
Yeah. So look, you all know the drill. This will be us kind of wrapping it up now, because I don't really think we've got anything else to talk about in the upcoming month of August. But as we've said, come the 1st of September or whenever the next one gets released, there will be loads to talk about. So thank you very much, Chris, for all of your tactical insight.
It's been a pleasure.
And thank you, Gary, for all of your tactical insight.
Insight. We'll not call it tactical. Chris is the tactics man.
Well, thank you for all of the insight. And guys, be sure to obviously check out the podcast. For those of you that haven't seen the content update that went out probably about a month ago now, we are now doing 2 podcasts a week. Have a look at all of the links that are up on the top of the screen at the minute. So this will be released at some point at the start of this week that you're currently watching. And the podcast will then be Friday and Monday. So you'll have lots to listen to and to keep up to date with up until the next show. But until then, up the Imps.
Up the Imps.
Up the Imps.